Everyone had their own passion in life. Someone wanted to become a football player, and our main character decided to devote his life to sports. He never aspired to become a professional baseball player. He simply enjoyed playing the game with his father. After this, the boy entered the university and began playing for the club and enjoyed this game like never before. But this happiness was short-lived and the action is postponed to the next match. Judging by the guy's face, he was already very tired. The universities were not going to lag behind each other and were going with an equal score. Still, our boy is not going to just give up the victory, and as soon as the opportunity arises, he immediately begins to attack. The guy needed to get there as quickly as possible, and then they could play this match to a draw. He had practiced this case many times already, and even though it was a rather difficult blow, he was still able to parry it. If they throw the ball to the last base, it will be an out and then their team can win, after which he gathers all his remaining strength to make his final throw. But judging by his facial expression, everything did not go according to plan because the enemy team began to rejoice. For him, the worst flaw in playing baseball was that he was a terrible perfectionist. After which we are shown a guy who is sitting at home at the computer, and next to him is a document about leaving the team. It turns out that our boy had a problem and he tried to find a solution on the internet. Really, in the modern world, no one can cure this because this is not baldness. As strange as it may sound, the boy has to give up his favorite sport just because he sweats too much during training. The boy begged for it to finally stop because it was terribly infuriating him. Now the idiot would break the keyboard. Well, now he'll be angry because my hands hurt, I'm telling you. I'm a real idiot. But suddenly he is distracted from the pain by a message that tells about his problem. Is there really a solution after all? The main character simply couldn't believe what he saw before his eyes and thought that most likely it was a hoax, and their blog was littered with all sorts of advertisements for medicines and other things. But when he saw the doctor's photograph, the boy thought that he really was a doctor, perhaps because of his bald head, and it seemed that he was a real expert in his field. Still, the thought appears in his head to undergo a consultation with this doctor. It definitely won't hurt. Arriving at the place, the main character was a little surprised and thought that the consultation had already ended because the hall was empty. Looking at the time, he didn't understand because it was now the height of the working day, when suddenly he was noticed at the registration desk. The girl told him that if this was his first visit, then he should leave his name and place of residence and only then go to the doctor's office. But she started talking so unexpectedly that she scared the boy half to death. He asked the girl for forgiveness, but she really appeared too unnoticed and asked whether he should write about his illness on this piece of paper. The director himself will conduct an examination and make a diagnosis, so let the main character go to his office. He was extremely surprised whether the doctor could really determine his problem with a routine examination. Upon entering the office, he was greeted by that same bald head. Meanwhile, the old man seemed to be at home. He asked the young guy to sit down and he cut his toenails. The main character was simply shocked by his behavior. Are there really still doctors in their time who behave this way with their patients? But he asked him not to be distracted and to quickly roll up his sleeves. But the damn old man still doesn't stop surprising him and touches his dirty foot right during the reception. What a disgusting thing. The boy was even thinking about leaving such a terrible place as quickly as possible, when suddenly the doctor simply took his hand without even washing his hands after his feet. But suddenly the grandfather just sits back and says that he probably had a hard time with his uncomfortable hands. The boy was shocked that he identified his problem so easily. But if the doctor had not identified this, he would have closed the clinic a long time ago. He tries to explain to him that people always have a certain temperature and energy, and if it begins to accumulate, then his illness begins. But the main character did not understand such abstruse terms. The doctor continued to tell that the guy constantly wants strange food, and towards the evening he begins to feel sleepy. The main character came to him just in time, because among doctors he is the king of kings in this practice. Well, now let's get acquainted with the main character. His name is Seo Min-jae. He is 21 years old and he is too easily persuaded, because he immediately begins to ask the cost of treatment in order to start it immediately. The doctor is only surprised that he is already ready to pay. Such impatience, he is going to conduct a special acupuncture session for him that will relieve all the stress. The boy thinks that he will have to lie down on a special table, but the old man says that there is no need for this, because such a masterful doctor like him does not care about the place or time where the procedure needs to be performed. He only warns the guy not to worry about this because it doesn't hurt at all, like a mosquito bite. It seems it was a lie. As soon as the needle pierced his back, the boy began to scream in pain. Meanwhile, the girl heard a loud scream and immediately ran to help. But before we leave, we are shown the history of her queries in the search engine. There were queries related specifically to the main character's problem. Time passed. A lot of time had passed since the boy was undergoing treatment, and even the second year of study at the university had begun. And what happened to his hands, it was a real miracle, but the main character still managed to recover from his damned disease. But he simply could not believe that the treatment could help him so quickly. Was that old man really a once great healer who was reborn on the Korean peninsula? Suddenly his friend named Kwon comes up to him. Heejin is 21 years old and studies at the Faculty of Business. He was wondering what the main character was looking at so intently. Had he really found the money? The boy just tries to pretend as if nothing happened, then throws away the sakura leaf and asks them to leave quickly. It turns out that there was an exhibition at which new club members were recruited. Everyone wanted to recruit as many participants as possible. Friends were surprised by the fact that they were already in their second year, as if only yesterday they had entered here and ate in the cafeteria for the first time. Kwon, I was wondering if the main character would join any club this year, because there is a rumor that he is no longer involved in baseball. But he only talks about how he is going to study and then go into the army, which greatly surprises his friend. Kwon, he became sad because he remembered something terrible, because next week he had to undergo a medical examination. Now it was the turn of the main character to smile. While he was laughing at the fact that last time Kwon couldn't even get the first degree, suddenly some lady called the main character. Kwon was simply shocked at the sight of such a lady and hurried to find out from his friend who this girl was. It turns out that she was the childhood friend of the main character with whom they lived in the same house, and she did the same with him. Of course, she turns out to be very clumsy and falls out of the blue, but the boy manages to save her from falling. The main character was extremely dissatisfied with her because she was going to do athletics and at the same time could not stand on her feet at all. The girl tried to explain that she was just in a hurry to meet him because she was glad to see him. But this excuse does not work because the girl falls in absolutely any situation. Kwon tried to make a good impression by saying that he was studying at the Faculty of Business, but our boy asked not to listen to this idiot. Anyway, he will soon go to serve in the army. While the best friend went to sit sadly on the bench, the main character decided to find out what the lady had forgotten here, and she was just handing out leaflets for their club. Maybe the boy wants to take a look. He is strangely surprised by the fact that she has already joined the club. He had to wait a little time. It was a special club where they practiced various techniques to relax and strengthen muscles. The guy thought that it was the same as sitting in a chair, but the girl called him stupid because it was completely different. She tried to quickly tell him about various sports techniques that help during classes, but suddenly the club members called her, and she urgently had to run. She would call him later, and he told her to ask him to treat her with food. While the girl was returning, the boy noticed something strange because there were a lot of sakura petals on her dress. The main character thought that his girlfriend was terribly clumsy and once again fell somewhere as soon as he wanted to remove them. Then someone suddenly grabbed his hand with the words, "Gotcha." It turns out to be some kind of abnormal girl with red eyes who uses a martial arts technique on the boy. She certainly did not expect such a turn of events. I don't know what she thought there, but she's talking about a strange man they have at the university, and now that she's caught him, she'll definitely be able to bring justice. The girl's name is Kwon Ara. She's also 21 and she's a member of this club. Even a friend came out of his depression to help the main character, and the girl with red eyes was surprised that everyone ran to protect him. Judging by his facial expression, the guy's condition was clearly not the best, and his friends tried to understand whether he was safe. Of course he was safe. They just threw him on the floor like a bag of garbage. The next day we are shown the main character who somehow miraculously managed to stand on his feet, but his back hurt like hell. He simply could not believe the physical abilities of that girl, how she even managed to catch and just throw a grown guy. Remembering yesterday, he didn't remember much, but he clearly saw that she was very ashamed for hitting him without understanding the situation. She turns out to be a special patrolman who was called here to keep order and simply mistook the main character for another guy. The girl seemed nice to him, but what was the use of a pretty face if she scattered people left and right? Meanwhile, he was corresponding with his girlfriend who was very worried about him. After all, the girl was nervous because now there were many cases with hidden cameras at the university. The guy simply cursed that incident and said that they should beat up the idiots with cameras and not him. Does he really look so strange? Suddenly the elevator doors open, and the same lady appears there. She was terribly sorry for what happened yesterday. Let the main character go and she will wait for the next elevator. He was going to do just that, but after looking at her textbooks, he realized that she was studying the humanities just like him. If suddenly she takes the next elevator, she will definitely be late, and that's why he even thinks that it would be better to go together. But still, the thought appears in his head that the lady can do anything. Clearly in the picture, the guy will turn into a disabled person. Although last time she didn't leave him on purpose, so everything shouldn't have been as bad as he thought. The boy invited her to get into the elevator, but she asked him to leave, but looking at her textbook, He realized that the girl was studying psychology and that teacher simply hates it when students are late. The girl still tried to refuse, but the guy simply took her hand and pulled her to the elevator. Until this moment, the boy still didn't know much. It was still the same hand that to this day causes him inconvenience, when suddenly something strange began to happen. It seems that hands should not be so holy. Then our main character had no idea that this handshake would change his whole life. It was as if electric shocks were leaving the girl and he was worried about her. It was not strange that the changes affected not only him, but also that girl. Not only were there electric shocks, but her eyes also changed. Meanwhile, strange things began to happen to the girl, and she could not understand what the hell was happening to her. Strength had been taken away from her, and now she simply did not understand what to do. The weakness was terrible. The guy still tried to get through to her, and she finds the strength to say that everything is fine. The girl simply said that she felt very dizzy, but the main character could clearly see that he was somehow standing on his feet. Now she stood in horror and tried to understand what had just happened. Maybe she had some kind of strange illness. The girl was thinking that the boy was not hurt, when suddenly he appeared right in front of her. Of course, she is terribly scared and doesn't understand why the hell he ended up here. It turns out that he just wanted to press the button on the elevator, and the girl was worrying in vain. But why had she never been afraid before? Looking at his phone, the main character cursed everything in the world because he really screwed up. Now he urgently needed to remember the names of all the professors. But still, he pays attention to the girl who is behaving strangely. Maybe she really felt bad. He simply cannot understand why she feels so awkward, because it is because of her that he is now late for his classes. But suddenly he realizes that the girl still thinks he's strange, although this is unlikely because Minjae has already told everything that they are old friends. After which the boy wanted to touch his head, but he felt something strange in his hand, as if many electric shocks ran through him. Entering the classroom, they realize that it is completely empty, and suddenly realize that classes start at 10 o'clock, and another dude appears behind. He starts asking Hyun why there are no psychology classes today, but he says that they were canceled and this was discussed last week. All the same, his friend began to accuse him of the fact that he was already in his second year of study and had not learned to understand what was happening in this damn place, and the girl all this time was watching them and trying to understand what was going on. After which the friends say goodbye, and Hyun hopes that he will no longer come on schedule. The main character just laughed at this situation and said that he woke up in vain this morning. He turns to the girl to tell the good news that today is a day off, but she stood like a stone statue. Suddenly he begins to think that she is acting so strange because of him, and thinks that the phrase about them riding in the elevator together was too rude. After which the actions are transferred to the hall, and the guy tried hard to train, so much so that he could no longer stand on his feet. He wanted to ask the lady for another round, but he just had enough for today. The boy approached her and noticed that today she was full of strength, but it was still time for him to give time to rest. Otherwise, he would die. While that brat was trying to get up with terrible pain in his back, the lady with black hair thought that she was somehow not feeling well today and didn't even go to class. In addition, she again made a mistake in front of our main character and now felt terribly awkward in front of him. And also that strange nonsense that happened when their hands touched. It felt like an electric shock ran through the entire hand. This is the first time this has happened to this lady. She couldn't even stand normally and almost fell. Immediately, she begins to shake her head to get unnecessary thoughts out of her head, while the guy continued to suffer from terrible pain. Suddenly, she realizes that she urgently needs to hit someone and asks the guy for another round. And he is terribly scared because she has already beaten him so many times. Can she really do it again? After which the actions are transferred to that old doctor who was just eating noodles at his workplace. He cuts his nails there. That is, just like at home. He sat with a satisfied face in front of his assistant and said that he had eaten enough after all. This place is ideal for Chinese cuisine. But in her opinion now, this was not the biggest problem. She tries to explain to him that life consists of more than just cool restaurants where you can eat, and talks about the treatment of that same patient. It turns out that this time the doctor decided to conduct an experiment with acupuncture and injected him with a beehive and honey. And if the guy suddenly develops complications, the doctor will have serious problems. If suddenly a problem appears, their clinic may be closed, but it seems he did not attach much importance to this, because if the patient suddenly becomes ill, he will still come to them for treatment. While he was trying to come up with a plan to deceive everyone, suddenly the main character bursts into the doctor's office screaming. They just turn to the guy looking at him with a look like, why the hell did this idiot come to them again? And so the doctor began to conduct an examination. After all, his hands stopped constantly sweating, but there were strange tingling sensations. After some time it goes away but then comes back. Maybe this is a strange side effect. No matter how strange it was, he couldn't find anything. The boy wanted his palms to stop sweating, so they stopped. The main character was dissatisfied with the answer, and the doctor didn't like the fact that young people dared to raise their voices at adults. He simply says that there is nothing wrong with this, because there are many nerve endings in the hands, and with proper nutrition and physical activity, it will quickly disappear. All the same, the grandfather decides to tell him about one thing, but it may not be exactly a side effect, but the boy seems interested. He whispered something in his ear, after which the main character simply screamed in surprise. The guy just wasn't going to believe that it was true, and that it could be cured. Well, if he wanted to get rid of it so badly, then he could. The doctor simply shows 5 fingers and asks him to give him 5, and he was simply shocked by the amount of 5,001. But not everything is so simple. 5 million. He wanted to ask for 50 daikate. But the main character will definitely die if he asks for more. But a student can't have 5 million, and this is just a side effect. Let him make a discount. But the doctor didn't like his impudence. This idiot still dares to yell at him in his office. Since the main character wants to get treatment, let him bring the money here, and he went to their belts. Even if the boy finds a part-time job somewhere, he will have to save this money for a very long time. And now he had the feeling that he had been deceived. He was very worried that the tingling in his arm would start again, and if he could not play baseball, it would become a very big problem. The boy was thinking about the fact that those therapies also cost a lot, and then a simply brilliant idea came to his mind. He had friends in the therapy club. The boy starts looking for something in his place and is sure that he definitely didn't throw it away. He just found it. It was the same leaflet with the club number. Now that life had driven him into a corner, he needed to get out. And now the main character was already standing in front of the entrance to the club, but somehow still did not dare to enter. Still, he had a lot of doubts in his head about this because that lady was a very famous athlete, and he's just a loser. Still, he takes a deep breath and thinks that everything should work out for him. A girl who is going to finish him off appears before his eyes, and all confidence suddenly disappears. All the same, that dangerous lady is also a member of that club, and the guy felt uncomfortable with her. But the main thing is to stay away from her. As soon as the main character opens the door, he immediately begins to talk about how he would like to join their club, but his speech ends abruptly. It was quite difficult to believe, but in front of the guy there were a lot of pumped-up guys, and it was difficult to understand which of them was the real boss of this rocking chair. As soon as they noticed the main character, they began to look at him like he was a punching bag, probably not the most pleasant feeling. They immediately started asking him about various awards in sports, but he only told them about baseball. They could even look up his nickname, Master Minjae. The jocks immediately ran to the computer to verify the veracity of this information. Seeing that it was true, the jock immediately ran up to him to shake his hand and say that he was now accepted into their club. The main character couldn't believe his ears, but they said that finally their club would have some kind of representation. But suddenly a very loud, stern voice is heard throughout the room, asking why it's so loud here. Some blonde appears who is unhappy that the guys are making so much noise because she is trying to study, and the red-haired lady is happy to see her friend. But they just show the main character and talk about how this guy just wants to join the club, and they show him what and how it works. The redhead immediately approaches and asks the reason why he came here, because he said that he would never engage in therapy. But this is the fate of the main character. The girl immediately began to scold the guy, because he decided to conduct an interview without her permission, and the guy even felt awkward because of this. And then let him bring an application form for the main character, and the guy can sit down. He immediately says that he is a second-year student at the Faculty of Business, Co Minjae. And she's the president of the club, Kwon Dajin. The main character knows what kind of club this is. He simply says that he is a little aware, but is extremely surprised that the president of this club was a girl. All this time, the girl thought that the boy was here because he would be given extra points for participation, and he decides to say that this is so. If suddenly he is here only for profit, then let him immediately leave because they play sports here. The boy was just going to submit an application, and then they would decide to accept him or not. But they accept him into the club by voting. He was very lucky because everyone was there, although in fact, one was missing. Suddenly, a girl with red hair whispered something to the blonde about how she should call her as soon as the lecture was over, but she didn't seem to care. She asked no one to rush and they could wait for her, since the main character could prepare everything for now. Suddenly, the red-haired lady whispered to him that the main character should not worry, because this was a pure formality. He could easily pass this interview. Suddenly, papers fly in front of him. 4 votes for and 4 against. You see, really quickly, it seems the vote was a draw. And now the boy was even more worried because his girlfriend said that this was just a formality. Since it was a draw, now everything depended only on her. And yes, this is the lady with red eyes who has already made a mistake in front of the main character twice, and why should she be late? The redhead immediately approached her and handed her a piece of paper. All she had to do was write consent or refusal on it. Meanwhile, she was thinking so that she would not have unnecessary problems. She wanted to give consent to his participation because she had already made a mistake in front of him many times. But only if the main character is in their club, then both will be terribly embarrassed. And what to do now? My head hurt terribly. Suddenly, the blonde joins the conversation and says not to be upset if the majority of votes are against. Although their club is not big, they are not bad. Perhaps there were several students who did not like athletes, and while the girls began to argue, the boy wanted to intervene in the conversation. He only makes a statement that he never studied at the physics department and knows very well that their club is not that big, but he really wanted to join them. May have stopped now, but he has been involved in sports since childhood and wanted to continue his career. It seems that his words somehow hurt the girl. He promises to help this club in any way he can, after which deathly silence hung in the room. Still, the girl with red eyes makes the final decision. She cannot go against if the main character wants to join them so much, but let her remember that they are a small group. This club was created to help other people. The blonde says that, of course, with 5 votes in favor, he will be accepted into their club. But only she carefully looks at the girl with red eyes and reminds that a person must be responsible for making his decisions. After which the test begins, the main character, of course, does not understand why the hell he needs to take something, but the girl must know what this idiot is capable of and how he can be useful. She asks him not to worry because they won't kick him out even if he fails, but the girl asks why the hell she was called here. Of course, because the main character simply cannot pass this test alone, and since she was the one who chose him, she simply must help him because she took responsibility. The boy says that this is quite logical, but she just doesn't understand why the hell he took the side of the dumb blonde. God forbid she vouches for someone again. She needed to start taking the test quickly because she still had a lecture ahead, so let them hurry up. Okay, the girl agrees to help this idiot, but asks that the test be completed as soon as possible because she still has training later. But the guy didn't even know what to do during the test. Since he still doesn't know where all the muscles are, then let him just do the usual stretching. He immediately thinks back to when he was on the baseball team and had done stretches like this so many times that he thought he could handle it. But only there were his teammates, and here was a girl with whom he did not have the best relationship. The boy was so worried that that damned side effect might appear again. Suddenly the blonde said that he was doing absolutely nothing. After all, she warned him that she had to go to a lecture. Okay. The guy still decides to get ready because the doctor said that the side effect will not appear constantly, but as soon as the stretching began, the girl got scared. But it turns out that the main character did everything correctly, and it was a special technique to relax all the muscles. And the blonde was extremely surprised that the guy knew about such complex techniques. Finally, he began to understand that the back muscles depend on many factors, and thank God that now the girl is not afraid, but before she was afraid and jumped at every occasion. The boy wondered if his technique was helping, but the girl was silent in response. He couldn't believe it because usually he was praised every time he helped others. And then that strange side effect began again, and the hand became electric. The girl was constantly writing down his data in her notebook. She was still glad that the main character was not a complete beginner as she expected. After all, his past games in baseball helped him in the future. Still, the blonde is about to leave and leaves them here in the hope that everything will be fine. As soon as she left the room, the main character could finally exhale. He thought that it would be much more difficult, but he was glad that this hell was over. But there was something strange. You remember that that strange side effect also spreads to others, so it seems that the girl with the red eyes felt bad again. The boy just stood there in fear, not understanding how he could help her, and then he remembered the conversation with the doctor. The doctor told him that the blood in his body does not flow like that of other people, which is why he can create a special energy that is released at a certain point. And this energy was also special. It was when it was released that a strange feeling appeared, as if a person had been electrocuted. But the main character, until the last, turned out to believe in the old man's nonsense. He just didn't want to believe it, because it meant that he would never be able to touch other people again. But the doctor said that this was not so. If suddenly he had a bad relationship with the person, then this would not happen. He just grabs the guy by the hand and scares him with what could happen now. While the main character sat in fear, the doctor showed him that everything was fine and nothing had happened. Still, this ability could not be activated on every person, but still the boy had to be careful. It turns out that everything depended on the number of people with whom you communicate. If there were a lot of people in your environment, then the effect did not affect you. Until this moment, the main character thought that this was just nonsense, and that this couldn't happen at all. But now it seems to him that he managed to awaken hidden superpowers. The boy looked at the girl and didn't understand why she was looking at him so strangely, but she remembers that incident in the elevator, and now the exact same situation happened. And now the girl is just sitting and trying to understand what the hell is going on here. The main character also didn't like his new power. It could cause a lot of problems for the people with whom he communicates.